agenda that you guys signed into law after the first 2 years, but implementation, while it's kind of an abstract concept, also brings challenges. When you look into the months or years ahead when it comes to implementing that agenda, what challenges do you think the administration is going to have to confront, and how capable do you think they are with the tools they currently have to overcome any implementation challenges?
Yeah. Well, even the word implementation, it sort of sounds technocratic. This really is about investing in America, because it's about using public investment, grants or tax incentives, to crowd in and unlock an enormous amount of private investment across the country. And you're right, the priority has to be on doing that efficiently and effectively, and with the policy goals and the American people in mind. I think certainly it's going to require, as a country, that we do things differently, do business differently. It's one of the reasons why the president has been so supportive of permitting reform. And while we're looking at the tools we have, the executive tools that we have to accelerate the process, we need to demonstrate to the American people in the world that we can build faster, more efficiently, and more equitably than we've done in the past. And while that's a challenge, I feel really quite confident and optimistic that we have the tools in place. Congress has given us the tools across those three pieces of legislation. We have extraordinary talent and capability across the executive branch, and there's been a lot of now, because these laws have passed, a lot of mobilization happening at the state and local level with companies and otherwise organizing around this collective effort. So no question there will be challenges and there will be setbacks along the way. But I think that collective effort of investing in America, I would just end on the note of, it also is, it summons a larger national project. Again, one that we haven't really taken on as a country since the 1960s, around collectively understanding the impact of what it means to invest across years in upgrading our infrastructure, changing the face of the country, whether it's electric vehicle charging stations or whether it's being able to say, we committed to the proposition that we were going to eliminate lead pipes from schools and homes across the country, and then being able to see many years down the road. And that also creates the opportunity for people to feel, and we've been talking about pulling this sense of pride in the United States, that we can do big things, and we can do big things collectively, and that's part of the potential here.
This has gone for a long time because this is 11 briefing, but I'm going to.
Do you have any comment on the billions of dollars that went to scammers during your administration?
Gentleman in the back.
Mr. Tees, do you have any comment on the fraud that took place on the COVID money? Billions of dollars went to fraudsters.
First of all, thank you for taking so many questions. We all appreciate that, and we hope your successor will too, and we do really appreciate it. A number of them dealt with this perception issue of how Americans are feeling differently than a lot of the positive data you have. Is there a perception issue in the other direction on inflation? Because when the president says he's not responsible for inflation, that it's a global issue and things like that, is there a problem or maybe a gap somewhere in how the White House views inflation when so many Americans feel it on a daily and weekly basis when they're having to meet their obligations? Is there a perception gap on inflation here?
Yeah, no, not at all. I mean, you have a president who has gone out and said that his top economic priority is to bring down inflation. You have a president that prioritized working with Congress to pass a bill called the Inflation Reduction Act, which, as we talked about before, was designed specifically to lower the cost of people's prescription drugs, lower healthcare costs, lower clean energy costs. And you have a president that has been tireless about working on those issues that connect most directly to the lived experience of people across the country. The efforts, which I won't, we've talked about at this podium around trying to help bring gas prices down in the wake of Putin's invasion. From things very visible in public, like the historically strategic petroleum reserve, to things the president is doing every day behind the scenes diplomatically with our allies and partners on those sets of issues. And as a result, in no small part because of those efforts, we're now seeing progress. That progress is not sufficient. We need to keep making more progress. But the president is actually focused today on those issues. And that's what you're going to hear. How can we keep making progress to reduce lower costs for people? And I would say this, I think, also is an area of contrast that the president will highlight, which is that he wants this economic conversation to focus on how we can keep reducing costs for the American people and doing things like cutting taxes for the very wealthiest people in the country and increasing the deficit as a result of that. Not only are bad economic policy, but they don't speak in any way to that core issue. So I think the president is very much focused on that issue. He's shown that he can actually work to deliver results and is going to keep arguing why we need to make more progress on that front.
Very last question, the gentleman.
Thank you. Speaker McCarthy clearly believes Democrats in the White House will give Republicans some concession for raising the debt limit. I'm wondering why Democrats would negotiate at all over that debt ceiling.
So we'll just circle back. I think I've answered elements of this before. It's important to distinguish between two things. One is the full faith and credit of the United States government and the sacrosanct nature of that commitment and the core commitment that the U.S. needs to pay its bills, and any sense that the United States is going to fail to meet that obligation has enormous economic and national security ramifications that we cannot get close to. Separate from that issue, having a conversation about fiscal policy, having a conversation about how we can reduce the deficit responsibly while also keeping our focus on lowering costs for families is something that the president is eager to have. And frankly, the way to have that conversation is for the president to put out his budget plan, for House Republicans to put out their budget plan, and then to have a conversation around those two. So that's why you've heard the president and the administration both commit that we will do that. We'll put out a budget. We'll put out a very detailed budget here in the next month. And our hope and expectation is that the House Republicans will do the same.
All right, thank
Any
you so much,
comment on
Dees.
COVID fraud?
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you
so
all.
much. Thank you, Dees.
Thank you.
All right.
Will you be shaving?
That's a good question. All right, thank you so much. And one more thing before we head into questions. I also wanted to highlight that today the Vice President is convening private sector leaders as part of the public-private partnership she launched in 2021 to address the root causes of migration from Honduras, Guatemala, and El Salvador. The Vice President is announcing that this partnership has generated more than $4.2 billion in private sector investments. These investments are creating economic opportunity for people in those countries so that they are less inclined to leave their homes and take the dangerous journey to the United States. These are long-term development efforts, but we are already seeing encouraging trends. Illegal border crossing from Guatemala, El Salvador, and Honduras have significantly declined over the past 18 months. That's in addition to the impact of the border enforcement measures President Biden announced just last month, which have resulted in a dramatic decline in illegal border crossing with Venezuela, Nicaragua, Haiti, and Cuba. All told, we are now seeing the lowest number of illegals since February of 2021. It doesn't mean our work is done. As you all know, we still have more work to do, and we're going to keep at it. But unlike Republicans in Congress who simply pull the political stunts and try to get in the way, we've got an actual plan to address these very challenging issues. And as you see, as I just laid out, our plan is indeed working. All right. Go ahead, Steve, kick us off.
Thanks, Green. Just a bit of housekeeping. Give an update on when the president will be coming back from Camp David. Is there a reason for his delay?
No update on when he's going to be returning. I think we had mentioned, and you probably saw his Twitter account this weekend, just laying out how on social media how the president was going to Camp David to focus on his speech for tomorrow night. I just don't have an update on his return, and I'm sure it'll be sometime this afternoon.
A different topic. In the wake of the balloon operation, NSC and the administration has said that it's going to brief members of the Trump administration on that. Can you give us a list of which Trump administration members would be eligible for that briefing? I mean, is former President Trump eligible since the president had previously blocked him from getting classified briefings after he left office?
So as we mentioned, and you heard my colleagues from NSC, that we are prepared, the intelligence community is indeed prepared to offer key officials, as you were just laying out, from the Trump administration on the briefings on this PRC surveillance program. And so we're not going to get into who are those those key officials. From here, I would refer you to the intelligence community on those logistics on when it's going to happen and who those key officials would be. But again, we are prepared. We are willing to have that conversations, to do the briefing, but just not going to get into the specifics of who.
And just on a third topic, a number of surveys, including from the AP over the weekend, showed that majority of Democrats don't want the president to seek re-election. They're looking for a new generation, concerns about his age. Without getting into whether or not the president will announce, does the president believe that he has to address those concerns from his own constituents?
So as you just laid out, I'm going to be very careful, covered by the Hatch Act. Don't want to get into the specifics of what 2024 is going to look like or any underlying components of that. The president has been very clear. He intends to run. And, I think the way that we should look at this is what we saw from the midterms, right? I think that's a really important point there where the president laid out the policy, right? He's the one that laid out the policy for senators and congressional members to really have a midterms that did not lead to a red wave, right? We saw what happened in the Senate. We saw that, yes, Republicans now have Congress, but by a slim majority. We were told it was going to be more than 60 seats, and it's not that at all. And that's because the president went out there, spoke directly to the American people, and laid out what it is that we have done the last 2 years, how we've built. You've heard from Brian Deese just moments ago. He took many, many questions laying out the president's economic plan, how it's working, but how there's still more work to do, but essentially talking through the different policies that became legislation, that turned into law. That was historic, and all of those pieces matter. And I think the State of the Union, he'll have an opportunity to speak directly to the American people, not just Congress, to talk about what we have done what he has done the last 2 years, and how he sees the future of this country. And so I'm not going to get into what the president should respond to. I think the president always says this: watch him and see what he does. And I think he has a record over the last 2 years that shows that he has delivered. And that's the numbers that we're going to pay attention to, right? We're going to pay attention to unemployment, how it's been down more than 53 years, a historic unemployment. We're going to pay attention to more than almost 12 million jobs that has been created under this president. We're going to pay attention to the 800,000 manufacturing jobs that has been created under this president. And I think that's what we're going to continue to work on, and that's what we're going to continue to speak to.
Thanks, Corinne. Some State of the Union preparations questions. Can you tell us what the president was doing at Camp David this weekend? What did those preps look like? Who is he working with? Is he still in major rewrites at this point, or just kind of fine-tuning, doing run-throughs? What was the weekend like for him? So
one of the things that I said this last week, is that, as you know, when it comes to big speeches like this, there's going to be probably tweaks and to the speech until the last minute. That's kind of how it goes. But I'll say more generally, or actually speaking to your question about Camp David, the president was accompanied by several of his senior aides. Work has gone into the speech over the course of many, many weeks, as we know, because again, this is something that the president truly sees as a moment to spend, as it did today. Michael Donnellan was there. Bruce Reed was also there with him. Steve Ricchetti, Anita Dunn, and Vinay Reddy. As you all know, he is his speechwriter, and so that was kind of the makeup of the weekend, and certainly not going to get ahead of anything else from here.
And how does the president approach this speech, given the different dynamic in the House chamber tomorrow night with the Republican majority compared to his speech last year? This is a Republican majority that's launched multiple investigations into his administration. How is he thinking of that as he goes to give this speech tomorrow night?
Well, as you know, the president is heavily, as I've said many times, heavily engaged in the writing process. When you hear the speech, you'll certainly hear there will be no question that this is a Joe Biden State of the Union speech. So just want to make that really clear. But don't want to get ahead of what you're going to hear from him. And so again, it's going to be about ensuring our accomplishments and what we've done the last 2 years. He'll talk about that clearly. He'll lay that out. And and I've also said this before, this is a president that's incredibly optimistic, and he talks about the possibilities. He talks about not betting against the American people. And so you'll continue to hear those types of themes in his speech. But of course, I'm not going to get into specific issues or the political moment that we're in as he's still working through and dealing with the speech for tomorrow. Phil.
Thanks, Kareem. The administration officials said that after the balloon was shot down, there were communications between the administration and their Chinese counterparts, kind of detailing maybe rationale and the why. Can you talk about how you guys are thinking through the next steps in this relationship, given the cancellation of Secretary Blinken's visit, and obviously what seemed to be a pretty brazen act over the course of the last week?
So look, our approach with China has been pretty clear, and we've been very clear about this, and it will continue to be calm, resolute, and practical. That is not going to change on how we're going to move forward with our relationship with China, with our diplomatic conversations as we move beyond this. The President has been clear. We have been and will continue to keep open lines of communications with China. As you mentioned, Blinken and Jake Sullivan and many others have continued those dialogues, especially after last week. In fact, like I was mentioned, there was multiple levels of conversation about their surveillance balloon, and again communicated directly with China after we took our action to bring the balloon down. So again, multiple channels of communication that will continue. China's, we believe, irresponsible action were visible for the American and the world to see. Not only that, at the same time, a second PRC surveillance balloon was seen traversing in Latin America. That's one thing that you all reported. And it's up to China to show it is serious about its words of being a responsible country, that it wants to build on the meeting that the President had with President Xi very recently. And so it's up to China to figure out what kind of relationship that they want. And as you know, yes, Secretary Blinken did postpone his trip. It was not canceled. And when the time permits, we'll see that trip back on the books. But again, it doesn't change our what we are trying to do and how we're trying to move with China. It's up to them.
And then, just one more. On Saturday when the President spoke just off of Air Force One, he seemed very definitive in making clear that he was the one who said explicitly, I want this to be shot down. Military leaders suggested wait. Was that a reflection of perhaps some frustration in terms of the political attacks you guys have gotten from Republicans who said this should have happened on the front end as opposed to the back end?
Well, just a couple of things. I know there was a TikTok that went out to all of you from the National Security Council that was pretty detailed on how everything kind of broke down for the past week and how things flowed. I'll give a little truncated version of that. On Tuesday, the President, through the National Security Advisor, Jake Sullivan, directed the military to refine and present options to shoot the balloon down immediately. The President also directed the military and the intelligence community to collect against the balloon so that we would learn more about China's capabilities and tradecraft. At the same time, we protected against Chinese intelligence collection because we knew exactly where the balloon was going. The military recommended taking the balloon down over water, following the determination by military commanders that there was undue risk of debris causing harm to civilians while the balloon was over land in Alaska, Canada, or the continental United States. On Wednesday, the President directed the military to take it down at the first available opportunity when it could be done with safety, especially as we're thinking about Americans' lives and being safe there, while maximizing our ability to recover the payload. Shooting the balloon down over water wasn't just the safest option. It maximized the chance of recovering the payload, giving us a better chance to get information from the Chinese surveillance balloon payload. But I think the bottom line here, and this is something that we want to make very clear, is that, look, what China did was unacceptable. We protected civilians, and we gained more intel while protecting our own sensitive information. And so I laid that out so you have an understanding of how this past week went. And, you know, the President, as we all know, is not just the President, he's also the Commander-in-Chief, and his number one priority is making sure that American lives are protected and that we protect, citizens in this country. But at the same time, we wanted to make sure that we were able to collect some data, which we were able to do, and that's why we took that action. And the president made sure we took that action.
Thanks, Karine. How much damage would you say has been done to the U.S.-China relationship because of this? And do you expect the president to bring this topic up in his speech tomorrow night?
Look, I will say this, as we know, when it comes to State of the Union speech, foreign policy is always a topic in that speech. I'm not going to get ahead of the president and what he's going to speak to as it relates specifically to China. I just laid out at the top that it is going to be up to China. It's up to China to see how they want to see this relationship moving forward. And so I'll leave it there.
Let me ask you one more broad question about the State of the Union address. We heard Brian Deese's take on the economic terms. Obviously, foreign policy will also be a theme. Can you just give us a broad brush answer on what does President Biden hope to achieve with his speech tomorrow night?
So, and I've said this before, so this doesn't change much at all, is that the president sees this moment as a critical moment, an important moment, to speak directly to the American people, to talk about the last 2 years, to talk about where we've been and where we're going. And that is important to the president. That doesn't change. This is his second State of the Union speech. Certainly not going to get into issues and get ahead of the president. But the president will underscore the progress we have made during one of the most challenging times, especially in history, and the progress the American people want us to continue to make by working together in this year ahead. You just heard from Brian outline how the president has carried out his economic vision, growing the economy from the bottom up and middle out, instead of from the top down. And one of the things that you have seen this president do, he has transformed how we see the economy. Right, when you think about the trickle down economy, he sees it again, bottom up, middle out. This is something that the president has done with the policies that he's put forward, and so that is something that you're going to continue to hear from him. Continue to hear from him about giving the American people a little bit more of a breathing room, because this is something that he understands personally. So tomorrow is going to be a big opportunity for the president, again, to speak directly to the American people, the millions of people who will be watching and who will be wanting to hear from their president, and he takes this incredibly seriously. Go ahead, Michael.
So I wonder if I could follow up a little bit on Zeke's third question. I think you made the assertion that the reason that there wasn't a red wave, or the reason that the elections and the midterms were more successful than many people thought they would be for Democrats was because of the president. That's a fair?
Yeah, and we've said that before. It's nothing new. We think the president played a very big role in laying out the message for Democrats.
So I wonder how, in light of the following poll, you can make that assertion. This is a recent NBC poll. Is Biden honest and trustworthy? 34% yes, 48% no. Ability to handle a crisis? 32% yes, 49% no. Competent and effective? 31% yes, 49% no. Has the necessary mental and physical health to be president? 28% yes, 54% no. Uniting the country? 23% yes, 50% no. I mean, given that poll, which is not just a single poll, it's been versions of that have been repeated in poll after poll, survey after survey since the midterm elections and before, and I think one of my colleagues referenced a recent poll that said 60-something%. More Democrats don't want President Biden to be their nominee than Republicans don't want President Trump to be their nominee. So given all of that, why are you so convinced that it was President Biden that caused the Democratic success in the midterms and not that the Democrats had success in spite of the president?
Well, I'll say this, because if you look at what candidates, senators, and congressional members ran on, it was the successes that the president had. It was on the bipartisan infrastructure legislation. It was on the CHIPS and Science Act, which was bipartisan because of the president was able to make that happen. It was because of the Inflation Reduction Act. If you hear the message that was coming out of Democrats during the midterms, it was what we were able to deliver. So yes, so that's what they used, right? They used exactly what the president was able to do in order to get that success. And so it is, right, if you think about all of the pieces of historic legislation that became law, clearly, that we did last year, again, the president led that. And the president went out there and spoke on these very important pieces of historic legislation. When you think about what it's done for the economy, what it's done for the American people, how it's provided some relief, think the president did play a big role.
So then just one quick follow-up. I mean, I guess, does it suggest then that maybe the Democrats who were talking about the president's agenda have been more successful at talking about the president's agenda than the president himself has been? And does that make it all the more important tomorrow and whenever the president rolls out his re-election campaign, if he does, but does it make it that much more important for the president to somehow find a way to communicate as effectively as I guess some of these other Democrats were? Because obviously, however he's communicating now isn't translating. So
I'll say this, Michael, and Brian spoke to this, right? I think he got this question every which way from your colleagues, and a very important question to ask. But I'll say this: we understand, and it is true that the American people are feeling inflation. They're feeling what the pandemic and COVID has done, right? The last 2-3 years, and so we understand that they're going to have some feelings about the economy right now. And so that is something that the president has always acknowledged and has said there's always more work to do. But also the reality is, if you look at the data, if you look at how the economy has bounced back because of this work that the president has done, and Brian spoke to this, I have spoken to this, when you think about record 12 million jobs, when you think about unemployment at the lowest that it's been in 54 years, when you think about the 800,000 manufacturing jobs and how important the CHIPS and Science Act is going to continue to be as we see manufacturers coming back to the U.S., those are real data points, right? Those are real things that has occurred these past 2 years, and it's because of the president. And so, look, we get where the American people are, but what we are going to focus on are the numbers that I just laid out, and that is also important. Will we continue to need to talk direct to the American people? Absolutely. That's why the State of the Union, we see it as an important moment to lay out for the president, to lay out how he sees the country moving forward, and also to remind folks and lay out what he has done the last 2 years. There's no easy answer there. I get where you're getting to, but this is an incredibly complicated time. What the president's going to focus on is how he's going to continue to deliver for the American people.
Thank you, Karine. Thanks. Is this the first Chinese balloon that the U.S. identified flying over U.S. airspace under this administration?
So what I can say is that we have talked about China's balloon program. We have generally on this, the Chinese surveillance balloons program has been around for some time. We even briefed Congress this past August. So I don't have any specific on any other balloon during this president's administration, but there has been a program that has been in effect. We have kept Congress abreast on that. But I don't have anything more to say or to share.
How is it possible that this administration discovered at least 3 previous balloons that flew over the U.S. under the previous administration, but Trump officials